Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a big show for you today. There's a thing or two going on in the news, isn't there,
I know.
Lindsey?
Trump was like, let's just start this year off how we're going to start it off.
I guess so. How was your New Year? You were not feeling so well. So I didn't party as much as I did, I guess.
Didn't. And there's like this thing that is going around, I think, that everybody that I know pretty much has been sick sometime between the end of December to like the beginning of January. So hopefully we're done with that. What
in
about
my
you?
household as well, but it did not hold us back. We made merry.
Pushed through?
New York City is my New York City. New Year's Eve. We were just talking about New York.
Yeah.
New Year's Eve is my favorite holiday of the year.
How do you get rid of a sickness? You just drink tons of vitamin C quickly?
You just power through it. Regular viewers of the show know that I'm just sick all the time, but I still show up to work.
That's good. That's good. That's noble. Coming up on Rising, President Trump issued a stern warning to Iran, telling them not to shoot protesters or else the U.S. would, quote, come to their rescue.
Plus, a tech billionaire is facing heat on X for saying that the First Amendment should be limited. I don't agree with that.
Well, I know you don't. And after Obamacare subsidies have expired, Democrats have now an opening to rally support against the GOP on the ongoing healthcare battle. But first, Robby, what's in your radar?
Well, Venezuela, let's talk about the big news story of the day. U.S. forces did oust Venezuelan dictator and narco-trafficker Nicolas Maduro over the weekend, capturing him and bringing him to New York, where he will be prosecuted for his many, many crimes. It was a highly successful military operation, and whatever one thinks about regime change, U.S. interventionism, and whether we should take a more active role in policing the world, there is no denying that Maduro was a loathsome tyrant who impoverished his people, and that they are thrilled he is gone. Venezuelans and Venezuelans all over the world, but especially in Venezuela, they are cheering Maduro's downfall, and they're thanking the U.S. and President Donald Trump for taking action. Just look.
I came in this country when I was 10 years old, and ever since I was born, every single person in power of the country has abused us and abused of their power. We have been living in a dictatorship for about 20 years. So I can tell you, this feels like a breath of fresh air.
Contrary to the leftist notion that the inhabitants of poorer nations hate America and love their corrupt dictators, many of the world's oppressed people actually want the U.S. to police the world. They love America, they love freedom, and they seek the opportunity to engage in trade, capitalism, and democracy, all things that are possible only once the Maduros of the world are gone. Moreover, Venezuela is in our backyard. It's part of the Americas. It's part of our hemisphere. It's not on the other side of the world, say in the Middle East, under influences of a different religion. And that is essentially the justification we're hearing from this administration, which, after all, did promise no new wars. That was a very important part of Trump's agenda when he ran for a second term. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this isn't war. It's a law enforcement action designed to bring to justice a dangerous outlaw. Here was Rubio on Meet the Press.
This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies?
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela in 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime, but not to the benefit of people of Venezuela. You know how destabilizing 8 million migrants is?
Rubio continued making the point I just made that Venezuela is not Libya or Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan.
Venezuela looks nothing like Libya. It looks nothing like Iraq. It looks nothing like Afghanistan. It looks nothing like the Middle East other than the Iranian agents that are running through there plotting against America. Okay? These are Western countries with long traditions among their on a people-to-people and cultural level and ties to the United States. So there's nothing like that. So I think people need to stop ascribing the apples and oranges here, the apples of the Middle East to the oranges of the Western Hemisphere.
But do you...
Number two, this is about the national interest of the United States. And what I'm confident of is we are in a safer and better place because we're taking it seriously.
Now, many in the MAGA movement are backing Trump and Rubio on this. The Daily Wire's Matt Walsh writes on X, I'm as reflexively non-interventionist as anyone can possibly be, but Venezuela appears to be a resounding victory, one of the most brilliant military operations in American history. As an unapologetic American chauvinist, I want America to rule over this hemisphere and exert its power for the good of our people. Now, it's true and a valid point, Venezuela is a different situation, and the operation to apprehend Maduro was entirely successful. Many Democrats are predictably whining about Trump doing this, but of course the Biden administration put a bounty on Maduro's head. What did they think was going to happen? Kamala Harris, for example, posted a lengthy statement of very little substance, no surprise there, in which she criticized Trump for daring to actually do what Biden, I guess, only wanted done in an imaginary sense. This irony was not lost, by the way, on former New York City Mayor Eric Adams. He writes, on January 10th, 2025, the Biden-Harris administration put a $25 million bounty on Nicolas Maduro for information leading to his arrest or conviction. Public safety is not a political game. You do not label someone a narco dictator one year and then pretend he's no longer a threat the next year simply because a different president is in office. That is cynical and irresponsible. Welcome to New York, Nicholas. Now, all cheering for Maduro's downfall aside, it still remains the case that the vast majority of the American people, including conservative Trump supporters, and including myself, do not want to get bogged down in running another country. The administration needs to focus on running America, on growing the economy, on bringing down prices, cutting regulations so that we can build more housing, on improving our education system and our healthcare system, on reducing crime. Venezuela's problems are Venezuela's problems, and while there's no reason we have to repeat our mistakes in Iraq, frankly, there's no reason we won't repeat them if we commit ground forces, try to oversee or manage the governmental transition, start handpicking successors, or telling Venezuelans that, well, they can have democracy, but only as long as it works out the way we want it to. We also must not simply plunder the wealth of the country. That would make us no better than the communists. What we want is for Venezuelans to have access to their own resources and to trade and sell them to us, so that both our country and theirs can grow in prosperity and freedom. They have oil, we have money. Simple as that. That should be the vision for Venezuela, not the 51st state, not some Afghanistan-style quagmire. But for now, the end of Nicolas Maduro's reign is a defeat for socialism globally and for drug traffickers, and a victory for free people in Venezuela and around the world. Viva la libertad. And we'll be talking about this a lot later today and in the coming week, but what's your immediate reaction?
Well, I think it's important to first start with kudos to the service members for the professionalism that left no one killed or dead or seriously harmed. So that's worth noting. I also think that, it's important to point out that there are a large population, the largest in the country, of Venezuelans in Doral, Florida, who were celebrating, and these videos are not made up, right? No. There are people that have strong feelings about getting rid of this dictator. 80% of residents in Venezuela were living in poverty. The economy was under collapse. Maduro was not a good guy. But that's still putting that to aside. We went from America first to America will run Venezuela in like less than a year. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the critical nature of a lot of people's feedback about what the president is doing is rightful, because the Congress people felt like they were completely skipped over in this process. Nobody knows what the plan, timeline, or the price tag is for what may look like a war. And this often leads into chaos that gets dragged out, like the examples that you cited that Rubio says are nothing to do with Venezuela when you look at Afghanistan or Iraq. But when you look at the vice president that's now in charge in Venezuela, President Trump is saying that they're on the same page. That was his first statement. And he completely skipped over the Nobel Peace Prize winner, which you would think would be the democratic next step for the country. He said she's in no position to lead. So he kind of like gave her a huge snub and looked at the vice president to possibly be the next leader. But she has been very direct about she called for the release of Maduro immediately. Right. And that's obviously going to cause friction. So I don't see how, again, going back to that price, timeline, plan, how this is going to play out smoothly when Trump tells the Washington Post over the weekend that whether U.S. troops are stationed in Venezuela depends on how Rodriguez, who is the vice president, responds to this. And her response is not ideal. Her response already is not ideal. And so when people are looking at this whole situation and wondering how it plays out next, that is a real question, because kudos to the service members for completing the mission in this way. But now that we've turned something that is a U.S. issue with him and drug trafficking into a non-war issue, even though we put boots on the ground there to get this man out of the country, what's the plan now?
Right. Well, if Maduro lacks legitimacy, Rodriguez lacks legitimacy too. The legitimate winner of the previous election was the person deemed the runner-up. That's who Machado supports taking over. Now, like you, I don't want to be overly involved in managing the country and figuring all that out. And I am, as I've said for weeks now, skeptical of a legal justification, law enforcement that skips around Congress's a need to weigh in, right? I think yes, I think he should have brought it before Congress. Now, the administration is saying this is law enforcement. Biden put a bounty on his head. What did you expect? That's calling for his arrest. We went and arrested him for crimes against our country, for which he will be tried here.
And it didn't raise red flags to you when you heard the president
say... No, it did raise red flags.
Well, no, when you heard the president say the U.S. will run Venezuela. We're like, wait, that's not what we...
That does raise red flags. It's not what Rubio's saying. It's not what other administration officials are saying.
So you think the president just spoke out of turn there?
I certainly hope so, because America first does not mean running Venezuela. Though I'm very happy for the people. The people are thrilled all over, celebrating the downfall of this truly odious man who will finally face justice. Coming up, we will continue our discussion of the capture of Nicolas Maduro. We'll look at reactions from lawmakers, from some Democrats, and arguments over what should happen next. Stay with us. President Trump is making it clear that there's a new sheriff in town in the hours and days following the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife.
Maduro is currently being held in the U.S. and, according to Attorney General Pam Bondi, has been indicted on charges of narco-terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess those destructive devices against the United States.
But with the longtime dictator removed from power, many are concerned about who will fill that power vacuum. Well, the president has an answer, and he knows many won't like it. Take a listen.
Who's in charge of Venezuela right now? Have you spoken to the newly sworn-in president there, Rodriguez? And what are your thoughts on the entire situation? You said the U.S. would run Venezuela.
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge. We're going to run everything. We're going to run it, fix it. We'll have elections at the right time. But the main thing you have to fix is a broken country.
Now, that unsurprisingly didn't go over well in Venezuela. The country's defense minister delivered a speech on Sunday rejecting the idea that his country would be, quote, run by the U.S. He said in that speech, quote, our sovereignty has been violated and breached, and called Maduro's capture a, quote, act of profound malice. He continues saying the Venezuelan military, quote, will guarantee the governability of the country and will continue to employ all its available capabilities for military defense, the maintenance of internal order, and the preservation of peace.
But some Republicans seem to be behind the president's plan to run the country. Senate Armed Services Committee member Tom Cotton was asked about it on CNN over the weekend, had this to say.
When the president said the United States is going to be running Venezuela, it means that the new leaders of Venezuela need to meet our demand. What we want is a future Venezuelan government that will be pro-American, that will contribute to stability, order, and prosperity, not only in Venezuela, but in our own backyard. That probably needs to include new elections that are legitimate, that are fair and free, that include leaders of the opposition who are currently in exile around the world.
Meantime, many on the left were outraged at the idea of another potential regime change, forever war. Iraq veteran and current Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego took to X to voice his disapproval, writing, quote, second unjustified war in my lifetime. This war is illegal. It's embarrassing that we went from the world cop to the world bully in less than 1 year. There's no reason for us to be at war with Venezuela. Several other Democratic members of Congress echoed Gallego, voicing their outrage that Congress was not consulted and questioning the legality of the action.
Vice President J.D. Vance issued a rebuttal to the swirling legal questions in a series of posts on X. He wrote, PSA for everyone saying this was illegal. Maduro had multiple indictments in the United States for narco-terrorism. You don't get to avoid justice for drug trafficking in the United States just because you happen to live in a palace in Caracas.
But Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thinks differently. It's not about the drugs, she said. If it was, Trump wouldn't have pardoned one of the largest narco-traffickers in the world last month. It's about oil and regime change, and they need a trial now to pretend that it isn't, especially to distract from Epstein and skyrocketing healthcare costs. Epstein is going to keep coming up. Meantime, several Democratic senators have teamed up with Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul to sponsor a war powers resolution. That resolution would block the military from taking any further action in or against Venezuela unless explicitly authorized by Congress.
Right, and that I support. And I've said from the get-go, if we want to take out Maduro, all right, that should be brought before Congress. discussed and debated. Even under the current war powers resolution, what we operate under, Congress is supposed to be informed, and then I believe there's a 60-day time period where the president can operate before getting explicit authorization. So even under that frame of reference, Congress should have been consulted, and they were not. The administration is saying they don't have to do any of that because it's not war. It's a law enforcement action against someone who has pending violations. I don't quite buy that justification, to be clear, so I would support the war powers resolution. However, the ouster of Maduro itself is something that I'm surprised to hear so many Democrats complaining about. Under Joe Biden, the U.S. recognized Maduro as an illegitimate leader of the country. Our European peer countries agree that Edmundo Gonzalez was the legitimate winner of the previous election and should become the president of the country, or they should have a new election. I agree with that. Again, I don't think it's the U.S.'s job to run this thing, so I'm troubled when I hear Trump say things like that. Also, it's a little bit of we can, yes, seizing their oil. We're not going to do that. We want them to trade with us, be a trading partner, be promoting prosperity, stability, all the things Tom Cotton said. We're not going to plunder from them. We want to have a good relationship with them.
And I think the biggest criticism coming from Democrats outside of the bounty, because yes, people all agree that Maduro was a terrible person, but how will we stop Venezuela from descending into chaos is the question. And President Trump does not seem to have an answer, and he can't make his actions make sense. I mean, Congress was reportedly notified as the incident was happening, as the action was taking place in Venezuela. And I understand that their argument is that we can't risk any lives by telling you it could get out, and then it was too sensitive of a mission to share. But that's not how Congress wants to play this game. And President Trump has messed around and skipped over Congress multiple times. Right. He said, okay, we're not calling this counter narcotics anymore, where we would talk to Congress. We're calling this counterterrorism.
And then you got
now we're back to narcotics.
Behind closed doors, or brief the leader of the Republican in the Senate. Yeah.
And what stuck out to me is that Rubio described this arrest as, quote, two indicted fugitives of American justice, noting that drug trafficking was key in all of this. But as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez smartly pointed out, former Honduras President Juan Hernandez, he was pardoned by Trump for the almost same exact crime, right? Bringing cocaine into our country, illicit drug overuse in our country. Both Latin American men were in Manhattan jails for their corrupt nature and bringing detriment to their countries. And one of them was pardoned by our president within a few days ago. And one of them is now being jailed and touted as this big mission. So the president has to be consistent in his stance with these drug criminals, particularly when we're trying to bring people down for...
He doesn't have to be.
Yeah, but then how do you explain your leadership to the country then? You can't do one thing. I don't know
why that pardon happened, and I'm not in favor of it, but this is a totally different situation that has to be worked out.
Yes, because the president of Honduras was described by Congress as one of the largest and most violent drug trafficking conspiracies in the world.
Former president of Honduras.
Yeah, the former president, either way. So we should take somebody when they're the former president then.
Yeah.
We're going to keep talking about this. Up next, President Trump was warned that he's warned Iran's authorities against killing peaceful protesters, saying Washington, quote, will come to their rescue. Don't go anywhere.
President Trump seemingly threatened to intervene in Iran if they shoot or violently kill peaceful protesters who are outraged by the country's ailing economy. The Truth Social post recently, Trump wrote, if Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go.
Now, senior Iranian officials fired back, warning that U.S. intervention would spark regional chaos. Iranian parliament speaker said that Trump's threats makes, quote, all American bases and forces across the region legitimate targets in response to any possible adventurism.
Protests in the Islamic Republic have seemingly taken a violent turn, as at least 8 people have reportedly been killed so far. The protests erupted Sunday in the capital, Tehran, with crowds largely chanting about economic grievances after the country's currency hit a record low against the dollar.
Now, Tehran is still facing economic crisis after a 12-day war launched by Israel in June. Adding to the pressure, the United Nations in September reimposed sanctions on Iran over its atomic program. So the country is facing economic collapse and having some drama. I was trying to read about how the protests grew to what they are now. And I think the last straw for a lot of people and business owners was that their gas is subsidized. And then the country leaders just decided we're just going to start raising those prices to try to build revenue for only themselves. And so people are rightfully mad. But I think when you have a 12-day war that we joined forces with Israel in, and when you see what just happened in Venezuela, there's concern from Americans that say, okay, if they say they're going to target our bases, even if they don't successfully target our bases and just at least try to, any type of bomb or anything goes off, we now are in a conflict with Iran. Yes, like we have to do something about it. We can't just not respond. We can't just allow them to do whatever they want. And so people are really trying to figure out what's the plan here now that we've already continued to agitate over there and made it a point to join the side of Israel in this battle. Now we're ultimately part of, and they said they were at war with us, I think like a week ago. They said that they feel that they're in a war with us, even though we might not take that claim seriously. That's where the country feels they are with the US.
They can't do, right. They can harass our bases, our soldiers. They can't do anything to the homeland. Look, I've all sympathy, of course, to the protesters there. They are right. They are justified. I hope they succeed someday in toppling their authoritarian Islamic extremist government. The justification for Venezuela that's being presented by the administration is that Venezuela is culturally more like, it's part of the Americas. It is socially, culturally, religiously not so far afield as the Middle East. Like they're contrasting it, saying we can do this. Venezuela won't be like Iraq because it's a different place. Won't be like Afghanistan. Okay, but you can't make that argument for Iran. So what are we doing here? I would urge Trump saying, we're going to attack them too? We're going to be at war with everyone? Now what about no new wars? What about America first? Again, if it's a limited one-time thing for just Venezuela, because this is, okay, maybe you can sell me on that. I'm not sure I'm totally convinced. Maybe you can sell me on that. You can't sell me on us coming in and doing regime change in Iran. That's a neocon fantasy. Maybe that's an Israeli fantasy or Israeli government fantasy. What are we doing here? That is clearly violating the America First ethos and has maybe, unlike Venezuela might have a significant chance of success. I don't know how significant it is. An Iran thing does not have a significant chance of successfully bringing about a tolerant, pro-Western American government. Let's be very realistic here. So cool your jets on this one is what I would say.
We have to go based off what's happened in the last few months, from the 12-day war to Hegseth recently saying Iran had their chance, and then saying that every adversary of the U.S. should, quote, remain on notice because they'll get anybody back anywhere, anytime. He said that we will protect anytime, anywhere. How is it our job to protect the citizens over there, specifically if the government is doing what President Trump noted they've always done? And not to say that's right or wrong, but as we continue to be the world police and say, oh, we're going to send troops on the ground, we're going to put who we want in charge. I mean, we've tried that. It's almost like insanity when you try to do something over and over again and expect different results. And so we're just in this limbo of...
Right. Policing our own hemisphere is one thing. That is a ideology I can maybe grapple with or try to understand, but we can't just go back to the policing the world, Bush era thing that Trump ran on repudiating and was successful electorally for that reason.
Now, healthcare premiums for millions are skyrocketing following the expiration of ACA subsidies. I'll have more on that in my lens. Stick around.
Welcome back to Rising. Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Let's get to it. So here's the thing about healthcare in America. You don't really notice how fragile the system is until your bill suddenly doubles, and no one in Washington seems in a rush to fix it. That's exactly what's happening right now, because Congress failed to extend Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies. Now more than 20 million Americans are waking up to higher insurance premiums, some by hundreds of dollars a month. Not because they changed jobs, not because they got richer, but because political gridlock just won. Healthcare economists warn this isn't just painful, it's dangerous. As premiums spike, healthier people are more likely to drop coverage altogether. That leaves a smaller, sicker insurance pool, which drives costs even higher. A classic policy domino effect, and once it starts falling, it's hard to stop. And let's be clear about who's getting hit the hardest. The so-called, quote, missing middle. Now, these are people on both sides of the political aisle. These are people that are self-employed, gig workers, small business owners, and employees, low-to-income earners who make too much for Medicaid but don't have employer coverage or can't get Medicare. In other words, people doing everything right and still getting squeezed. Take 37-year-old single mom, Caitlin Provost, a social worker who tells CBS News her monthly premium is jumping from $85 to $750 a month. Or this Salt Lake City filmmaker, Stan Clausen, who also tells the network that he was paying just under $350 last year, and now his premiums are $500. In this economy, many people, that could be a breaking point for them. Now, politically, this fight is far from over. 4 vulnerable House Republicans recently joined Democrats to force a vote to extend the subsidies, though the effort is a long shot and expected to stall in the Senate. Still, some Republicans acknowledge the stakes. Politico notes that Republican Representative Dan Muser put it plainly, saying, quote, "A lot of people are receiving this health care. They don't need the rug pulled out from under them." Now, voters seem to agree. A KFF poll released in December found overwhelming bipartisan support for continuing the subsidies. 84% of the people that are enrolled in the marketplace, including about 7 in 10 Republicans, say Congress should extend the tax credits. And the poll also found that if they do expire, most enrollees say either President Trump or congressional Republicans deserve most of the blame. Now, Democrats are already turning this into midterms messaging because unlike other policy fights, this one is immediate and personal. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer summed it up this way.
When it comes to health care, the damage has been done. After January 1st, it's very hard to put that toothpaste back in the tube. And Americans will know when health care dies, it was the Republicans who did it.
Republicans, meanwhile, are scrambling, blaming Democrats, blaming the system, and still searching for a simple, unified plan to lower costs.
Well, sometimes you got to be the grown-up, and you got to make the tough choice, and you got to
let people suffer. That's the tough choice.
That's emotional manipulation. This was a
$85 to $750
subsidy that was always intended to expire, so now it's gone away. We're already spending tons and tons and tons of money on healthcare in this country. We're spending more than any advanced nation. We can't just throw more money at the problem. We do need fundamental reform to the system. I agree with that, so that we can lower prices. I've pointed to medical malpractice reform. We should do drug pricing reform. We should end patent abuse. We should make it legal to import drugs from other countries. We should cut out middlemen, insurance middlemen. We need a market-based revolution in how healthcare is provided in this country, in my view, not a socialist revolution, which makes it free, but it makes the care not as good as other nations have found out. That's all the things we need to do. Just throwing more money at it. Yes, I don't want to raise prices for people. I know that's hard. Democrats always have a winning message by giving you more stuff. Hooray, more stuff for you. But that's not the responsible thing to do.
Well,
I would argue.
I think it's irresponsible to allow Americans, because Congress failed to do their job, suffer in this way. And so there's people who are not relying on any government entities in the way that they're asking for any medical coverage as government sponsor. They're not on any SNAP benefits. These are people that are in the middle working hard that literally just want to be covered so that they're not just going to the doctor and never figuring out who's paying for it. It'll end up being us, and trying to get health coverage that literally are being priced out. There's parents who have been in articles that are like, I'm just going to keep insurance for my kid because I want to protect them, but I can't afford to have it for me as well, that we're in this ACA market.
Well, you have to have it. You're required to have health insurance.
Right, but some people are still just not going to do it. That's just the fact of the matter, what happens here. There's a lot of people in this country who just decidedly don't have health insurance that are in either the gig economy or freelancers. And you have to remember, these people are not just Democrats.
Made it illegal
but
to
these people are
insurance.
not just Democrats. These people are not just Republicans. These people are across the board, people that fall in this middle, 20 million people that are seeing rising possible costs in their health insurance. And so even if the idea for Democrats was to kick the can down the road for 3 years just so people can afford to have health insurance, that is something as opposed to nothing.
So
Democrats are not doing anything. No, but instead of 3 years, how about 3 years Congress gets to work and you name all the possible ways? I can't imagine that. But in this 3 years, they can actually come up with a new plan, because you know what? Republicans have been complaining about Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, since it was even pitched as an idea. And so the fact that we are like more than a decade past the idea when we first started talking about the thing, and there's no feasible level plan forward that the Republicans have laid out that makes health insurance affordable in our country is absurd. And so when people start to get angry and think about who they voted for and who will change the economy, let alone the many other things that the president has already done that have made it harder for the average American to afford things, when these same Republican voters realize that they either have to decide on illegally having no health insurance or paying $850
I would say the
a month.
Republicans disliked Obamacare for good reason. Because of Obamacare, a lot of Americans lost access to health care plans that were rendered illegal because of Obamacare that they were perfectly satisfied with. This is the central lie of Obamacare. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. That was not true. People lost access to the kind of health coverage that worked for them. We need a market-based solution where insurance markets exist and you pick the right kind of coverage for you. Maybe you're a young, healthy person. You really only need catastrophic coverage like the kind you'd get if you were in an accident or something like that. You don't go to the doctor very much. You don't need that kind of coverage. If you're an older American, maybe it's the reverse. Let the market adapt to what individual need is. We don't have that because of it's a partially socialized system. It's not an entirely socialized system. Probably an entirely socialized system would be better than this weird hybrid system we have where so many people are still trying to squeeze out a profit, and then it's not. You don't have accountability over what the price is because you don't even know what you're paying. That's what I always say. We talk about this all the time. Is the central crisis in healthcare is that you don't know what you're paying for, so the market can't function.
Millions of Americans were not covered before Obamacare, and millions of Americans have insurance after Obamacare. And so that was a good thing. And no matter how...
Millions of people have insurance that they had insurance they liked and don't have it anymore.
Okay, but we're thinking about the country as a whole, and people still are going to go to the doctor or still go to the emergency room. Again, you're not answering the substantial question of who would pay for it when people didn't have insurance, when it wasn't, as you're saying, illegal to not have insurance. Well, people didn't have insurance and they still went to the same doctors. They still never paid the bills. So where does that just go? It just falls into this ethos of debt that we have and we have to figure out how to cover. And so this is what I'm saying.
Maybe you wreck your car and you don't have car insurance. You got to pay for it.
Yeah, but a lot of people just don't. And so then we're just sitting here in this,
then you get
this broken system.
Repo or you get
okay,
going
but
to debt.
I think that Republicans understand
make a bad bet, lose. That's your fault, not mine.
When people have real life examples of the fact that their costs are now going up and Democrats are accurately pointing out the fact that Republicans decided to do nothing instead of anything at all, well then in November, Republicans are going to see those same people that voted for them to be in their position in the first place are going to say, well, I'm uncomfortable. Your leadership has failed me. And then what's the plan? So if they're okay with those results, then just know that would probably be the case because a lot of people are upset that they're paying this much or going to lose insurance or just decide to not have it at all.
Next up, a tech billionaire is raising concerns about the lack of regulation on social media, and he says it's time to limit the First Amendment. That's next. Don't go anywhere. Shlomo Kramer, an Israeli tech billionaire, drew strong criticism from free speech advocates after saying the U.S. needs to limit the First Amendment and control social media platforms.
Now, Kramer made the comments while discussing the risks of cyber warfare in an interview on CNBC. Let's take a look.
And I know it's difficult to hear, but it's time to limit the First Amendment in order to protect it, and quickly before it's too late.
What do you mean?
I mean that we need to control the platforms, all the social platforms. We need to stack rank the authenticity of every person that expresses themselves online and take control over what they are saying based on that ranking.
The government should control the social media.
Yeah, should do that.
Now, Kramer went on to say that governments need to do more to educate people against lies and misinformation online, and said that without regulation, society will only become more polarized as the rise of AI makes it harder to separate truth from fiction. He also argues that governments need to develop cyber defense programs as the world heads toward what he says is its first, quote, cyber war. A longtime tech entrepreneur, Kramer co-founded the cybersecurity companies Checkpoint and Cato Networks, which he currently is the CEO for.
Kramer's comments made waves on social media, with prominent voices on both the right and left speaking out against him. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said an Israeli cybersecurity billionaire demanding to take away Americans' guaranteed First Amendment free speech and President Trump threatening war and sending in troops to Iran is everything we voted against in 24. Trump voters spent the week threatening a tax revolt because they are so furious about the never-ending waste, fraud, and abuse of their hard-earned money going to foreigners and foreign wars. The focus should be on tax dollars here at home and defending our God-given freedoms and rights. And Young Turks host Anna Kasparian asks, why would a foreigner's views on our Constitution hold any weight at all? Yeah, he is entitled to his view that the First Amendment is bad or needs fixing or blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter, don't care, not going to happen. So, sorry, that one's set in stone. It would take two-thirds of the states, three-quarters of the states, and there's the AP Gov process for amending the Constitution, whatever it is. It's not going to happen. Misinformation, bad speech, speech you don't like is protected by the First Amendment. If the platforms want to decide to get rid of anonymous speech or require verification or do whatever they're going to do, they can all do that at their discretion. They're private companies. They can experiment with different levels of moderation. I think more user-based curation and moderation is a good idea rather than top-down moderation. That's all fine. It has nothing to do with the government and won't. So, in Europe or Israel, maybe it's different, but in the U.S., not going to happen.
I will say I agree with the MAGA outrage here, specifically the point that there should be no foreign involvement in what we do with our First Amendment or any constitutional rights in our country, period. I was one of the people that do think that misinformation and disinformation is a problem, particularly, around the elections and around some of the use of AI in campaigns. They're like, this is obviously fake. Okay, well, we ask somebody's grandmother if they think it's fake. I think that we need to make sure we're differentiating.
I mean, misrepresenting someone, if the AI videos are so advanced that it's a video of
getting to that
Lindsey,
point.
then that is already defamation or fraud. That is already illegal. It could be the case that we need new legislation or some kind of tweak to Section 230, the internet statute I talk about all the time that has to do with regulating speech on the internet, to make clear that like copyright or like child porn or like non-consensual pornographic images, it is not okay. You can't just post that at your own discretion. So that's a teensy little tweak we need to make.
That you're willing to make, okay.
There are, again, not literally all speech is, the Supreme Court has recognized threats of imminent harm, threats of violence, etc. There is a small category of speech that is not permissible.
And I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I agree with most people that are in the mindset that Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, the leaders of those organizations have a responsibility to have misinformation moderated, and it's up to them to really try to make sure that they're doing that accurately and not through a lens. I know we looked at Elon Musk and how he transformed his chat bot and how he made it more, people could say, conservative leaning in its responses.
He did for a bit, and then he walked it back. Grok's doing fine these days.
Well, Grok had a lot of mishaps, so better late than never, I guess. But I think there's still some important and necessary things to do, and your responsibility as somebody who is running these platforms where people like you always like to point to the fact that this generation, the younger generations, even older generations are getting their news first and foremost from these social media platforms, even from YouTube. And so if that's the case, and we are excited about it because our show is there, it's important to not have incorrect information running rampant without any type of corrections, because people just take it as fact or law. I don't think that the American public is dumb. I just think some people don't have time to research every single topic and every single thing people say. I think humans make mistakes. And so I think there is a room for it to be corrected. And why not fact check in a way that like we fact check in articles and we have to go back.
It depends what you mean by correction. Because sometimes what people who are saying, I'm not accusing you of this, they mean misinformation, or they mean things that need fact checking. They're talking about an opinion they don't agree with. Like we have, people can reach vastly different conclusions or have strong, discordant, well-informed opinions that are miles apart on contentious subjects, right? That's different than saying, oh, this video is of Venezuelans protesting, and it's actually a video of Iranians protesting 10 years ago or something. That is the kind of thing on social media that does tend to get corrected by the safety measures that the companies have implemented. The community notes feature on X, usually there's a video, and if it's being portrayed as about something that it's not, usually there's a note on there that says this poster is wrong, this is actually from so-and-so and so-and-so. Also, you can ask Grok about it, and you'll get a pretty accurate answer. So those kinds of categories of misinformation, I think, are being corrected by the platforms, having nothing to do with government, and that is good. If they just mean, well, we disagree on whatever the thing is, well, that's not getting corrected because there's got to be room for debate.
Well, we have a bad example of when it was really implemented, and that was around COVID. A lot of the fact checks that automatically came up were people saying things that we weren't 100% sure about, and automatically said, this information is, we saw the things that popped up on Instagram, those little alerts that said.
Yeah, that was Facebook.
So
that was not community driven. That was independent.
So I said we have a bad example of it, but I do think
people,
when people are posting leisurely and saying something that's even in opinion just wholly incorrect, like just not true, like this is completely inaccurate, the number of people that were killed. This is completely inaccurate. And these are people with good who decides that? What do you mean? The death toll actually is reported. There's actual real numbers. That's what I mean. Like, it's your opinion.
But it's reported by people, and then it can be corrected, and then it can be like.
No, come on, Robbie. You have to have some. I'm not talking
but
about
you
somebody
understand
saying
that there's
if the
quibbling
sky is
over,
blue. No, we have to just acknowledge that some things are just wholly true.
What if I say it's cerulean, and you say it's.
No, so that you can't. But it's not. It's certainly not red. So that's what I'm saying. That's just the lie, right? You're looking at it, and your opinion is that looks red to me. Well, you may be colorblind, and we should note that in the.
I'm saying these things are a little blurrier than I think than liberals sometimes claim. It's there's facts and there's opinion. Well, I don't.
Being the wild west, as we've tried out, is not that great because then you have people who are truly riled up about things that are incorrect. People are really like angry enough to stop speaking to family, to go out and be incited in some way. And so all these things are not good when we are telling lies. And so we need to make sure that people understand what is being said is not the whole truth. I think there's some context around that, whether it's community driven or the leaders of the company or a combination of both is a good thing. Okay. But I don't think that anybody from another country should be suggesting in which ways we go about it, because I think he's particularly trying to make sure that people are not talking about his country in a certain way.
And he's allowed to suggest it, by the way. I'm not calling for him to be censored. I'm just saying he's wrong and I disagree with him, and that would be a bad idea. And also it's just unworkable because our government, the First Amendment protects speech, and we're not revising it, we're not undoing it. Lesser laws that try to get at that get struck down by courts left and right because the Supreme Court has, to its credit, taken a maximal view of what is covered by free speech. And I think that's a good thing. It makes our country unique and awesome and powerful. Up next, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, not talking about awesome and powerful. He made a stunning announcement, however, this morning, or is going to make it. Stay tuned. Breaking this morning, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz announced he would not be seeking re-election.
Now, Walz said in a statement, quote, "I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute I spend defending my own political interests would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of the race and let others worry about the election while I focus on the work."
Walz had been under fire recently over welfare fraud scandal in his home state. He addressed that in his statement, writing in part, "For the last several years, an organized group of criminals have sought to take advantage of our state's generosity, and even as we make progress in the fight against the fraudsters, we now see an organized group of political actors seeking to take advantage of the crisis."
Now, Walz had initially said he'd run for re-election back in September. Obviously, he changed his mind. You got your wish, Robbie.
I am thrilled at this outcome. I think this is the right thing to do. He oversaw, he allowed to happen on his watch, a massive welfare fraud scheme involving fraudulent nonprofits, feeding kids, healthcare nonprofits, daycare schemes, which got a lot of attention last week. Debate, quibble with aspects of not all the claims have been vetted and verified, but even before that YouTube video, the Nick Shirley video that went so viral, it turns out that numerous daycares were already being investigated by the state authorities. Payments had not ceased, even to ones that had been closed down. So a lot has gone wrong there. I don't want to make it about racism or about demonizing any specific community. God knows there's far too much fraud in welfare in red states and blue states and among every class of human being, and it's bad. But Tim Walz's reaction to all of this, I did not believe for 1 second he had a sincere interest in fixing this corruption. He tried to make it, we're being so attacked and so persecuted that people have noticed this. I just think it was a bad response, and he was not a particularly impressive political candidate, and I can't believe he was Kamala Harris's choice for VP. But
Now you're going on a rampage. I want to talk about at hand because you're kicking a man while he's down, which you're really good at. I think that we need to provide some grace for Tim Walz. Now, during the pandemic, there were a lot of people that, and federal regulations were relaxed in a way that a lot of people and abuse happened during the pandemic. Many people have already been prosecuted. So I'll give him that window when the pandemic was at its height and coming right off of that. But when he just responds to it in the way that he did now by putting some sort of task force together in December of 2025, and saying I'll take some fault for some things, but blames the federal government for other things. I don't think all of the entire year of 2025 or even 2024 should have passed without him doing something that was a bit more. I do think that a lot of states will see a lot of fraud continue to play out past how people took advantage of what was happening during the pandemic. And no, all the governors can't resign. People need to.
And again, he's not resigning.
Yes, he's not resigning. He's just not going to run again. But I think other governors should use this as an example and say, hey, okay, we're not just going to point out certain people or races, which he was smart to say. We're not going to attack the entire Somali community because something went wrong here, but we should respond quicker, even if it may stain our legacy in some way, because we understand that a lot of different states were taken advantage of during the pandemic. But what shouldn't happen is that years afterwards, it continues on. And so, you know, I'm excited to hear about what Amy Klobuchar has to say, because the New York Times is reporting that she will put her name in the hat for governor. I think she's a pragmatic person that has worked across the aisle, really smart, and I think that she would have a great opportunity to lead Minnesota. So that would be an interesting, probably easy race for her to win. So I think that that's a good option that they have on their hands.
Yeah, it's interesting. She wants to go from Senate to governor. If they go from Senate to governor, governor to senator, I don't know what's the more appealing job.
Well, don't you want people to have experience in the government when they go into different positions?
I was just talking about, you know, what she has presidential ambitions. She ran for president. She's going to settle for governor of Minnesota, but it's fine. I don't. She's done a lot that I don't agree with, but we can get into that at a.
But you like her better than Tim Walz.
I like her personally. I've actually lived, I won't say where, but in the same building as her in Washington, D.C.
So you guys like rubbed elbows.
See her in the elevator, said hi to my little dogs. I don't bear her any personal ill will. I don't really bear Tim Walz any personal ill will either. He didn't bully me as a kid or something, but I don't think he's that politically talented, and it was a very odd choice for the vice presidency. Kick him while he's down. I mean, when he ceases to be a notable political figure, he can retire and, you know, not be. I think it's awful that some people apparently drive by his house and scream the R slur at him, and it's like, people shouldn't, you know, get a life. Don't do that. But it is fine and, in fact, good to criticize the kind of governance he presided over. In addition to everything else, the thing I hated about him from the beginning is that under his tenure in Minnesota, there was a COVID snitch line where you're supposed to report your neighbors for not following social distancing. That does it for us on Rising Live. We got to run, but look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you all week. Take care.
On the snitch line.